Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. It begins with a bedtime story about an abbey of monks who grow a giant beanstalk in hopes of reaching heaven. They found a floating island among the clouds called Gantua where the gigantic inhabitants were now able to descend to earth by way of the stalk. Under the leadership of the two-headed General Fallon, they invaded Albion and began developing a human appetite for acquiring anything and everything. The monks were able to remove the heart of a fallen invader and crafted a magical crown that allowed their king Eric to enslave the entire giant race. He ordered them to return to their kingdom before chopping down the beanstalk. And years later, when Eric died, he was buried with the magical crown as well as leftover beans from the monks. The part of the story that all parents skip is that the giants now prepare for the day they can return to Earth and get revenge on Eric's kin. Centuries later, a young farmer sent to town to sell his uncle's horse and wagon to buy some repairs for their leaky roof. Jack's told not to get distracted but can't help but visit a play about King Eric where the Princess Isabelle watches disguised as a commoner. He notices her getting harassed for her valuable jewelry, and when Jack tries to defend her honor, he's knocked to the ground. His attackers all back down at the arrival of the king's vanguard, who collect the princess while Captain Elmont politely reminds Jack to kneel like the rest of the kingdom. The soldiers return Isabelle to her father King Brahmwell, who's in the middle of getting his portrait done and quarrels with her over her disobedience. He wants her to marry Lord Roderick, who's only interested in the kingdom, and says to his right-hand man Wicke that she can wander off a cliff after their wedding for all he cares. When returning to his study, he realizes that he's been robbed by a monk who's stolen the magical beans but didn't manage to find the crown. He tells Wicke to lock down the city and search everyone trying to leave, which includes Jack, who in his distraction got his uncle's cart stolen. Waiting at the overcrowded gates, he meets the monk Abel, who's desperate to escape from the city but even more important, protect the beans from being found. He trades them to Jack for his horse, telling him not to get them wet and they're worth a hefty sum, before riding away quicker than you can say scammed. He doesn't get far though before getting surrounded by the guards and tortured until Roderick realizes that he isn't going to talk and kills him. Meanwhile, the overly protective father continues to scold Isabelle for putting herself in harm's way as she reminds him of his wife who he lost many years ago. Likewise, Jack's uncle shouts at him for accepting the beans but isn't as polite about it and says that the plague which killed Jack's dad isn't as bad as Jack himself. He throws the beans on the floor and leaves the house to try make money while Jack picks them up, not noticing that one falls through the floorboards. That night, Isabelle sneaks out of her father's castle and seeks adventure, but the moment it begins to rain, she takes shelter at the nearest sign of light. Coincidentally, it's Jack's house, who admits that he still recognizes the princess, so she reveals her identity and gives him her name. They bond over their enjoyment of books, and particularly the Giants of Gantua, which they both grew up with, while the rain pours down on the rickety shelter. When the water touches the stray bean, it takes root and sprouts into a massive beanstalk that knocks Jack through the roof of the house and traps Isabelle inside. It carries the cottage and princess into the sky while Jack hangs on and tries to rescue her from outside by chopping at the stalk with an axe. He manages to get the door open, but the floor suddenly collapses and Jack falls, swiping Isabelle's bracelet off her wrist on his way down. Fortunately, he safely slides and tumbles all of the way down the beanstalk until being knocked unconscious when he hits the ground. The next morning, the king and his army find Jack at the foot of the beanstalk with Isabelle's bracelet in hand, but he explains everything that happened. The king orders Elmont and his lieutenant Crawe to climb up the plant in search of his daughter, but Roderick insists that he tag along for his own reasons. Jack also volunteers, so Roderick, knowing that the stalk is the result of the magical beans, convinces the king to let him join them as he has some questions. A small party begins to ascend the beanstalk with climbing gear while the king waits at the bottom for days on end with the larger army. They climb until reaching an impassable section of the stalk and needing to zipline across to another vine to continue upwards. When it's Jack's turn, Crawe gives him a little motivational kick, but before he makes it across, Jack's grip becomes weak and he slips. He's luckily caught by a lower vine and they continue the climb until it goes dark and rain clouds form above the party. All of a sudden, a soldier's sword gets struck by a bolt of lightning, causing half of the knights to fall from the stalk and be caught by the safety rope. Since the rest are unable to see around a bend in the vine, Roderick orders Wicke to cut the rope and he gleefully kills half of the king's rescue party. The rest finally reach the top of the stalk by morning in the edge of the giant's realm Gantua, but find Jack's house empty with no signs of the princess. Suspecting that she went deeper into the island searching for food, Jack knows that Isabelle would have more likely been looking for adventure. Elmont, Crawe and the only other living soldier, Bald, begin to search the area while Roderick and Wicke forcibly take the beans from Jack. He saves one just for himself before the group follows markings that Isabelle carved into trees until the trail ends at a half-finished symbol. Jack notices signs of giants, so they split into 2 teams of 3 to search the area quicker, with Bald sent off alone with Roderick and his assassin. They get to the edge of the island where Rod does the "look I see Isabelle" strat to get Baldy leaning over the edge, then just pushes him off. Wicke questions why people always scream right before they die when suddenly the gigantic foe snatches him up and eats the wailing man. A second giant Phi climbs the cliff, but before he eats Roderick he produces the crown of power and his true intention for joining the party. Elsewhere, Jack and Crawe get caught in a trap, but with the help of Elmont they manage to free themselves before the giant trapper arrives. Jack holds his breath and hides underwater while Elmont behind a boulder and Crawe a tree, but the giant Phi smells out the first terrified knight and closes the distance that he puts between them with 2 measly steps. Thinking that he's about to eat his friend, Elmont valiantly stabs Phi in the foot but gets himself knocked out and taken captive. Phi takes them all the way to the giant stronghold where Jack follows and sneaks inside relatively easy as he's about the size of a rat to them. Their leader Fallon tramples the bones of centuries-old humans while questioning Isabelle about her army that he assumes she's brought with her. He can smell that she's a descendant of King Eric and parades her around the dining hall as the giants intend to eat her along with the captured knights. Elmont talks in his general posh sarcasm, not being understood by the giant, while Crawe outright tells Fallon to choke on his bones, getting himself eaten. Fumm has priority to eat the princess since he's the one who caught her, except that Fallon has become a ruthless dictator over the years despite only being a general. Just then Phi and Foe enter with apologies as they've brought Roderick with them, who enslaves all of the giants just with the crown's presence. Even Fallon is helpless against its magic and kneels as low as the human demands until he's able to use the giant-like stairs up to his throne. It has Isabelle and Elmont thinking they're about to be released, but the traitor tells the giants that they will attack the kingdom of Cloister at dawn. The giants cheer for their new leader, who seemingly just released them from their prison, but Fallon plans on stealing the crown for himself. Roderick leaves the giants to eat his comrades, so the chef prepares to cook Elmont as a pig in a blanket while Jack tries to rescue them. The knight's thrown in the oven while Jack scales the rack of utensils, and just before the giant chops up the princess he pogo sticks a humongous knife into his back. Elmont uses a blade Jack passed through the pastry to cut himself free, but it's the young farmer who slays the giant when it backs up into the knife. The giant collapses dead, and after a congratulations the trio make for the beanstalk to warn everyone about the traitor's plan to invade. As the whole city gathers around the base, the king's general Entin suspects foul play among the rescue party due to the cut rope causing their demise. He requests that the beanstalk be cut down to avoid an invasion in case the giants are real, but Brahmwell has them hold off for hope that his daughter will return. When the trio get to the edge of the realm they find the stalk guarded by a sleeping giant, but Jack comes up with a plan. They drop a beehive into his helmet, causing the giant to frantically run around until stepping off the edge of the island. Its body splatters at the base, providing evidence of their existence and pushing Brahmwell to order the beanstalk be cut down for the sake of the kingdom. Elmont decides to stay in Gantua to confront Roderick, while Jack and Isabelle spend all night climbing down the beanstalk as the town hack at it from below. They see the lights of Cloister and share a kiss before noticing the crowd of King's men chopping deeper through the base of the stalk. The next morning Elmont wakes to the arrival of the army of giants and prepares to kill Roderick, who feels unbeatable with his crown. Fallon can smell the human but tells his little head to just be quiet as they proudly wait for their king to almost be assassinated. Still abiding by his command, they attempt to break their way through the top of a cave to reach him, while Elmont has a knife fight with Roderick. The best moves when Elmont loses his dagger upstream, and then while being drowned he catches it floating in his mouth to slice Rod's face. The crown must give the user powers because Roderick somehow beats the king's greatest knight, leaving him dangling from the edge of the realm. Elmont grabs onto Roderick's boot, and when he goes to slice his fingers off, Elmont drives the knife into his foot followed by his chest. Slowly bleeding out, Roderick crawls back to the entrance and Elmont's unable to claim the crown in time when the giants finish breaking through the roof. Fallon obtains the crown for himself, giving him the unquestioned control over the giants that he wanted, much to Fumm's disapproval. Before the army can descend the stalk, the king's men finally cut it down, causing chaos at the base as the roots whip around, killing multiple soldiers. Elmont's forced to leap onto the collapsing plant, leaving behind Fallon and the rest of the giants as the humongous stalk comes crashing down. Jack and the princess let go into a haystack, barely avoiding farming equipment, while the stalk blankets the entire distance of the kingdom all the way to the castle. Elmont leaps off into the moat just before it collides with the wall, and the princess reunites with her father to warn him of Roderick's betrayal. Before he leaves, Jack receives a large payment from the king, and the princess leaves with the rest of the army to marry a person of noble birth. Everything's about to return to normal as the giants are about to return to their stronghold when Little Head points out the bag of magical beans by Roderick. Fallon tosses them into the water, causing multiple beanstalks to burst from the ground, and he orders his generals Fifo and Fumm to lead the way. They all leap onto the stalks and weigh them down to descend to Albion, where Jack has been wandering around searching for his horse. He locates it just in time when spotting the giants' invasion and riding off to warn the army, who are casually strolling back to the castle. The moment they realize that Jack's yelling giants, their army emerge from the tree line and catch up in seconds, while Fumm tosses a windmill, knocking Brahmwell's crown from his head. Only Isabelle, the king, and a handful of knights survive the slaughter, with Jack trailing up the rear and giants in close pursuit. Elmont gives the order to fill the moat with pitch, and when the king's inside, set it on fire before raising the drawbridge. Jack's little steed barely makes the leap inside while Fallon tries but takes a face full of arrows from the knights and falls in the fiery moat. He's presumed to have died as Fumm just watches him scream for help to become the new leader of the giants, but Fallon survives and finds another way into the castle. The siege begins with the throw of a bell where giants use grappling hooks to pull down the drawbridge and throw flaming trees into the castle. The king tells his daughter and Jack to light a beacon and warn the other kingdoms, but inside the throne room Fallon emerges from the sewer system. With his giant mace in hand, he chases the descendant of Eric upstairs and manages to snatch Isabelle off the balcony as she passes. Jack picks up a weapon and leaps at the giant, but he's caught out of the air and his axe throw does nothing but piss the little head off. Fallon prepares to feed on them both, but Jack throws the final bean that he kept down the giant's throat, causing a stalk to grow from his stomach. It pops the little head and tears apart Fallon before completely destroying the castle, sending pieces of it skyrocketing towards Gantua. The giants break inside the city, but as Fee-Fi-Fo and Fumm approach the king's men, they suddenly all surrender and kneel. Jack's recovered the crown from Fallon and uses it to order the giants to return up the stalk before the soldiers chop it down. Isabelle decides to marry Jack, which Elmont approves of, and her father makes the law that the princess can wed who she wants. Some time later the pair tell the story of the giants to their children, and when they get asked where the magic crown is, they say it's in a safe place. It gets shown being converted into St. Edward's crown and centuries later is secured in the Tower of London. Students walk around on a tour while an obvious descendant of Lord Roderick takes special note of the ancient artifact. The camera pans out through a modern-day London to show the giant's realm still looming overhead. And the movie ends.